Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues brings expert guests to the airwaves to talk through your divorce questions and fill in the gray areas about separating. From thinking about divorce to how to behave during divorce to what to do after, this is Divorce Dialogue.
Welcome to Divorce Dialogues. I'm Catherine Miller. I'm the founder of the Miller Law Group and a trainer at the Center for Understanding in Conflict, and I am on a mission to change how people divorce and help them divorce with dignity. And I'm excited to welcome my guest today, Karina Diaz. She's a licensed psychotherapist and an art therapist with over 20 years of experience supporting individuals, couples, and families through trauma, crisis, and emotional transitions. With a compassionate, creative approach rooted in deep clinical expertise, she helps clients navigate the complexities of mental health and healing, especially during life-altering events like divorce. Welcome, Karina Diaz. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Catherine.
I know that you've worked in many different clinical settings over the years, and I'm wondering how that diversity of experience has shaped your perspective on the emotional journey people go through before, during, and after divorce.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I mean, it really has given me, I think, provided kind of like a bird's eye view, if I could describe it in a way, of what the trajectory of that life path might be. Right? For different people from different cultures at different times. I've had patients who I've seen at the start of a separation, and maybe now the children are adults and see them now as well in therapy.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's been an honor to be able to be a part of that process. And also, has increased or deepened my compassion for the unique path of each person. Each individual is going to be very different in how they process that trauma, right? Because it is a traumatic event in the life of everyone involved. And society has different cultures, and different societies have different ways of viewing how a divorce should be, or what path it should follow, or if it should even happen, right? So there's a lot of that pressure that I think happens for the individual going through it. And so there's no direct, I think, there's no formula, right, for a right way.
Yeah, I think when you think about the perspective of the different people involved, right? So the characters that are going through the transition of the divorce include the parents, right, who have chosen or been dragged through somebody else's choice, but at least one of them has made that choice. And then the children, and to have the sort of a perspective of the different threads through the same, if I could use the word treatment sort of process, treatment person. When you talk about that as an honor, I totally get that. To be trusted by multiple members of a family to help process the same set of events from their perspective is really, really a wonderful thing. And I wonder if, like, for you, holding the perspective of more than one character, just to use my word, helps you actually do the work with all of them.
How does that? Is that the question?
I imagine that it does. Is that right? Like that it does?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
There needs to be, which is really difficult. It's a difficult ask for everyone, and especially the parent going through it, right? Because there are so many different experiences at the same time, so many different perspectives of the same event. And we are asking a lot, in my mind, we are asking a lot of the person going through it, right? Which, of course, it's all of the family members, but the person who is separating from this person who they've promised a life to and with, it adds a rupture that they're betrayed by in some ways. And so expecting that person to be both a parent and grieve at the same time that they're grieving their own parts that have been gone through an earthquake is a very difficult ask. So I think holding all the different perspectives is very very important for everyone involved so that they all feel valued, acknowledged of what is happening.
Yeah. You work with art therapy, and I can imagine that could really be a very helpful modality for working with people going through divorce. And so, talk to me about how that works and explain what art therapy is for our listeners.
Sure. Well, art therapy is one of the many ways or approaches to treat someone, right? It doesn't take place of many other modalities like TFCBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. I forget all the acronyms. There's tons of ways to talk about what someone is going through. And the key here is talk, right? So a lot of these processes that happen for us as we discover ourselves in different situations, we don't have words for, or we have trouble connecting to language, right? To be able to express that to anyone else. So art therapy provides one other way to express whatever it is that the person may be feeling that they might not even be fully aware of, right? So in a particular session, especially for someone going through a separation or after post-separation, one of the things, especially when there is, like you call them, different characters in that same story, having them be able to express themselves in a way that they're not used to can kind of give light, especially in a picture, right? And I say picture, maybe like drawing. So a lot of kids are really drawn to that, and it's less threatening in a way. Then it provides not only the children, but the parent kind of a visual too of what the others may be experiencing, and it gives a little bit more empathy or compassion to the process.
Is art therapy good for grown-ups too?
Definitely.
Would it be good for someone like me? I think of myself as all thumbs. I cannot draw anything that resembles anything like what it was that, I was looking at or what I was trying to do, with a couple of exceptions. But so for someone like me who thinks of herself as all thumbs, is art therapy still an option?
Definitely, because it's not necessarily about it's not about judging what it actually, the product, right? It's not an artist, not trying to become artists in a session. It's more about being able to express what is inside that we have trouble connecting to. And drawing is not the only way to do that. I also had worked with someone a long time ago who had just gone through separation and an adult, and they were going through their own, it was a very difficult separation and was going through a lot of legal aspects. And I had been called to the witness stand to speak on behalf. But and so it was a really difficult, of course, as you can imagine, process. One of the things that she kept when I kept processing with her the separation and what she was going through, and she went through a very abusive situation, what kept being highlighted for her was a book of poems that she had written as she was from teens up into early 20s, and that she had left in the home, and because she ran away from this difficult situation, she couldn't retrieve it. So a lot of what we focused on is a book of poems, right, in this next chapter of her life.
Makes sense. I'm Catherine Miller, and you're listening to Divorce Dialogues, a podcast dedicated to educating people about divorce-related topics so everyone can divorce with dignity. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts to be sure that you don't miss an episode. And I'm talking today with Karina Diaz about the emotional journey of divorce. And we've been talking about the different characters in the divorce story, right? The different members of the family or friends, neighbors, other people who might be impacted, upset, relieved, or whatever it is that the feeling is, but involved in the divorce of a couple, that more than just them. And, as someone who is trained in infant mental health, what do you think that divorcing parents should understand about the emotional needs of their very young children?
So much. And again, a very big
I'm sure
ask.
that's true.
So
We'll
much.
start at the top. What's the most important thing that they should be thinking about?
Well, I think, and again, it's a big ask, but remembering that the baby, the infant, is also experiencing something. Not really, they're not sure because they're infants, but something is happening, right? Something happened. And that something that happened creates a lot of inner lack of safety and maybe possibly anxiety, nervousness, not really knowing what is happening, right? So a lot of this that is happening internally is happening externally by behavior, right? So lots of maybe crying more than usual, or clinginess, or screaming, or hitting things, displaying behaviors that maybe the parent it wasn't used to, but might not really understand the behaviors. And because they're going through what they're going through, may attribute it to, and I hear this a lot. I don't know what happened. They didn't used to behave this way. Like they never behaved this way. Such a good baby. And they get angry, frustrated, right? Because again, they're going through their own vulnerability and insecurity and anxiety. And so these behaviors trigger their anxiety, and it can be really difficult to take care of the infant, right? So a lot of this, or what we work on in sessions, is psychoeducation and expanding compassion to both people going through the same process, experiencing it in different ways. And also that the infant doesn't have the words to say, Mom, I don't feel good, right? This is not working for me. What happened to this person that was here all the time and now they're not?
Yeah. So, in your experience, what kind of family therapy do you think works best for people who are thinking about and going through the divorce process, particularly when kids are involved?
Well, family therapy, I think it's really important. When they're going through a divorce, both parents might not be a part of, or might not be able to be a part of the same session. But there's many ways to manage that for the therapist, the family therapist, where they can both share at different times, session time, to be with the children in the session. But I think the children need to be a part of those sessions. It's really important. So even if it's one of the parents with the child kind of processing what's happening. So we don't only give the sole responsibility to the one parent who's going through the traumatic event. And there's more support, right? Because the parent needs so much support for what they're going through, and so do the children. But sometimes the parent might not have the tools or the resources to be able to do that for the children. So I think family therapy comes to mind first. Different approaches could be cognitive behavioral. You can do all of that depending on the ages of the children.
Yeah. I think that a lot of times I find that my clients are really reluctant to bring their kids into some kind of family therapy. And sometimes kids are reluctant, not little kids. Like little kids are just like, okay, I'm just going to go along. But an older child, 8, 9, 10, 12, those children often resist. So what do you say to people who are worried about bringing their kids into some kind of treatment, or whose kids are resistant?
Well, I would first acknowledge that anxiety around it. And kids who are older, 10, 11, 9, 8, 9, 10, 11, they know more than we give them credit for about what's happening. And I think sometimes we get nervous about it because of what we're going through, what we feel internally. And so when we don't really have the resources to have conversations about it with our children, or I've even had parents say to their children, he just took a trip and never came back, that kind of thing, right? So they might not themselves have those resources to be able to extend that to the children. So I can understand that. And again, family therapy can look very different for the different age groups. It could be, I've had families who bring their adolescents who are initially very resistant to the whole process. So there's an offering to having individual sessions at the same time that you also have sessions with the parents, right? You can handle it both ways, always with the focus of processing what is happening for everyone involved. When the children are older, right, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, give them an individual space so that they feel agency in what's happening around them. Because as we know, there's so much lack of control that is happening, especially for the children. All of these decisions are happening up here. So it could be a way for them to feel a part of and educate the parent of what they can do and support the parent about how to handle these different facets.
I had a case on a client a number of years ago who had children who'd been separated from her husband for a number of years. The kids were at boarding school, so they weren't, going back and forth and all of this sort of time. And I suggested the option for having some kind of family therapy and bringing the children, who are obviously in their teens, not into the negotiation room, but that having a mental health professional like yourself, Karina Diaz, reach out to the kids. And I said, well, maybe you don't really need that because it's been such a long time. And, and my client was like, no, absolutely. This is an essential thing because my parents got divorced when I was a teenager. And if somebody had reached out to me and asked me what was important to me about that, I think that the trajectory of my life would have been totally different. And I might not even be here today.
Wow.
Getting divorced. And I mean, like, I even have goosebumps remembering
I
from
got
years ago,
goosebumps.
right? Because like that's super powerful insight, I think, on her part into really the sort of the compassion for her children who would almost definitely have felt like they couldn't voice their feelings for fear of disrupting their parents who were obviously in pain, going through this process. So what do you think about that story?
Exactly it. Exactly it. I mean, and I love what you say about divorce and going through divorce with dignity, because it really triggers so much for everyone involved about who we are as human beings, right? A sense of self, which is highly disrupted when this separation or disruption occurs, especially for children who don't have a say, right? Even for the person
Exactly.
who was kind of sucker punched by knowing this person wanted to separate. But so that story just highlights how it carries, or it can carry throughout a lifetime, and really shadow who you become as a human being.
Yeah. You're listening to the Divorce Dialogues podcast, and I'm Catherine Miller. Divorce Dialogues has been educating people about divorce and relationship issues for over 10 years. Please subscribe to the podcast and don't forget to check out our previous episodes on the podcast website, divorcedialogues.com. And I'm talking today with Karina Diaz about the emotional journey of divorce. And Karina, if people want to learn more about you and your practice, how can they do that?
Yes, I think the easiest way is my website, karinadiaztherapy.com.
That's perfect. And Karina Diaz's contact information and website will be in the show notes with this program. So let's turn our attention a little bit, if we can, to the individual going through the divorce. And for people who've been in high conflict or abusive, emotionally, it doesn't have to be physically abusive relationships, I think that a reinvention of who they are, right? So from someone who was, I hate this word, but the victim of that kind of treatment, how does the healing process look? What does it look like once they're out of that abusive relationship? And how do they begin to trust themselves again and think even eventually about trusting others?
It is a journey. It is a journey. It is definitely a journey. And I love what you said. It's like that it is a rebirth, because there is so much of your identity attached to who you were with this other person in the life that you had with this person, or that you created with the person, with or without children, what you became and who you loved. And the key word for me becomes love, who you loved to be in this relationship. So when that ceases, whether it's your choice or that of that person's, because of circumstances, because of the abuse, whether it's emotional, psychological, physical, there's another layer, which is betrayal, right? You hurt me. So you didn't only not do what you needed to do by me, right by me, but you also hurt me. There is this deep wound that happens. It's hard with trauma. A lot of the anger gets directed this way, right? So this person blames themselves. Usually, a lot of what I hear is self-blame, or feeling like a failure, or I did something wrong, or I am not lovable enough, I am not loved. It becomes a sense of who they are. So I think first is, especially when there is high conflict in a relationship, a lot of the therapy that happens at the aftermath needs to be kind of trauma informed, be able to talk to the person knowing that something pretty big just happened, and to acknowledge that this is rocking a lot of different parts of themselves. And as that gets acknowledged and shared and processed, then a reinvention can occur. But I think that initial holding is really important.
And Karina Diaz, in my experience, for people in that situation, their whole sense of self is really damaged and sometimes destroyed to the point where they identify as in who they are in the world in the context of that relationship. And that person, that sense of self needs to be rediscovered, rebuilt, repaired, renovated. And so, what is the first step that someone who might be listening to the program who's dealing with that situation or is in a bad relationship, wants to leave and is afraid of that void? What should they do or think about to help themselves?
Well, I think it's important to if we don't know, because I think a lot of times that person that we're maybe describing as we talk about this is a person that may feel like they can't leave because they won't. They're not only is there an internal hole that might be there of we don't know what, and it's too scary to find out at this time. But also there's a lot of other people around us who might not want us, or we don't feel supported by, which is why we feel alone in this. I think it's important to remember that you're not alone, right? Even though we think we're alone in that moment and no one is going through what I'm going through or can understand what I'm going through, there are a lot of people who have gone through similar circumstances. And no, they're not you, but you are not alone. And so there is help. And I think that's important to remember, right? If they're wanting to leave and don't know how because they're scared of what that may do for them internally, they don't have to do it alone. There is help. There is support. There's tons of support. If you don't want to go to one therapist, you can go to support groups. You can even just go to a retreat and start that way. And then as you get more comfortable, then start venturing out in different directions. Because once you even just take this step, different doors will start opening up.
Don't you think that the language has a role in this, like how people talk to themselves about the experience they're going through? Talk to us about that.
Yes, 100%. I think because of these, right? Depression, anxiety, there's so much stigma around feelings, so much stigma around being a human being and the experience of being a human being, which all of us have emotions and we feel them throughout the day, every single day, at different intensities. And so when one of the intensities is fear, shame, some of the anger, right? All of these are really hard to bear, to tolerate. It becomes really difficult to know. Okay. We judge ourselves. In that moment, the minute we start to feel those emotions, we start judging. And the judging is very harsh, right? So we start telling ourselves things like, I'm a failure, I am unlovable, I am this, I am that, I am the other. We're telling that to ourselves. No one is telling us, unless there is an abusive partner, and that may be something that we're hearing constantly. But usually a lot of what we're telling ourselves is ourselves, about ourselves and what we're going through. And so language becomes really important, because when I said earlier, you're not alone, is because other people have also gone through what you've gone through. And so let's think, and that's something that I talk a lot with clients, is how would you say that to a friend? Like if a friend came to you and told you, I'm going through this and I feel like a complete failure, what would you tell them? And more often than not, they have the words, right? They have the
Of course
language.
they do. From that perspective, I think that's a really clever way of thinking about it. What would you say this to somebody else? Would you say, you're right, you're kind of a
You're
jerk?
right. Probably not, right?
Yes.
So let's practice. How would you say that to yourself? Like repeat your name, and then kind of start doing that. Yeah.
So just in our final minute or two, what would you say to someone listening who's not sure whether or not therapy could be something that helps them through the divorce process?
I would say there's a lot of caring people out there wanting the best for you, in that there's always someone out there that can help and support you through this difficult process. So therapy is a great way to go about that.
That's great. Well, Karina Diaz, thank you so much for being my guest on Divorce Dialogues. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.